So as we know with strength and conditioning, there's a big focal point around force output and production. And obviously when we're discussing the concept of speed, power, strength, force output is going to be an unequivocal foundation to those endeavors. But with that being said, it doesn't give a complete solution in and of itself. And especially when we look at different athletes across different time points of their careers, different archetypes and different force profiles, these are going to require some deviations within the training setting. And the way that we like to kind of go about that is looking at it as delineating between the pursuit of overload and the pursuit of variability. And these connotate strongly to having a myotendinous focus when we have that pursuit of overload, whereas with the pursuit of variability is going to shift into more of a myofascial based emphasis or focus. Between the two ends, everybody is going to need some combination of both. For some athletes, we're going to need to spend more time on that overload musculotendinous focus in order to produce faster times or faster outcomes. But for some athletes, that may not be the case, and we need to focus more on the pursuit of variability or this pursuit of myofascial-based loading or adaptations. So what we're going to cover here in this module is going to be just looking at a couple of different demonstrations or examples of this, looking at two different athlete types with two different profiles, and then just kind of show how we can utilize this pursuit of variability to populate some of our exercise selection and help drive coordination and connection for the sake of speed development. So if we start here with a common accessory movement like a step up, we'll have Jeb just go ahead and just kind of start doing some standard reps here. So step up is great. There's a million different ways that we can dress this up. But if we say, for instance, that Jeb is lacking in impulse here, there's ways that we can go about manipulating or modifying this movement to kind of address that. So rather than just plugging in block 3, exercise A, we're going to do step ups, 3 sets, 6 reps, and then just work to overload that for 4 weeks. Maybe in his case, it's not necessarily about overloading the movement, but being able to do the movement with the right qualities that we're looking for. So if we theoretically say that Jeb here is someone who lacks impulse, what we're going to have him do is work into that top position, and then I'm going to have him kind of work a fast drop, but then an abrupt stop. And then from this position here, importantly, having no counter movement in his action here and just firing straight from that foot into that step up position. And then a good fast drop connecting back. So stay right where you're at for a second. Just kind of shift forward and lift that heel off the ground. Good. And then from right here, I want to think about pushing directly through that forefoot and then that foot on the box. No counter movement. Go. Good. Let's do 3 more just like that. 2, 3. Excellent. So a simple adjustment, it doesn't change the movement. We're not necessarily coaching anything different or anything crazy. We're just going to try to focus on what he individually is deficient in or he's lacking in, taking a very basic construct movement and then changing the way in which he is doing it. So this to me is an example of how we can utilize variability within our training setting without deviating from what we're actually doing. For those of you who work in team sports or big groups, this is also an easy way that we can build in some individuality to what we're doing, rather than thinking about having to section people off or bucket people into different things and then have totally different things going on. So now if we have our second athlete, Kai, come in here, and where Jeb was lacking in impulse, Kyla is lacking a little bit more in elasticity. So for her, we're going to have her work more of a dynamic and kind of a rebound back step back to that top position. Stab, go. Stab, go. Even though we are working on this fast deceleration, fast down step, we still want to have good rigidity and stiffness in the foot. So as she's coming out of that bottom position, stabbing, we want to have a minimal heel displacement as best as we can. Perfect. So an easy example there, 2 different athletes with 2 completely different profiles, different strengths, different deficits, same exercise, same load implementation. We're still with the same progression scheme that we were working with the rest of the team, but we were just able to build in a subtle difference for each because we identified what they specifically need to focus on for the sake of their speed development. So with the step-up pattern, we saw how we can utilize the concept of variability for addressing specific tissue adaptations or specific deficits across different athletes. Another way that we can utilize the variability component is by using it as a progression metric or a progression strategy rather, where we are looking at the progression of movement variability in lieu of progressive overload. So in other words, rather than saying, okay, for block 2, movement A, we have dumbbell split squat, and for the next 4 weeks, we're just going to do that same dumbbell split squat with 5 to 10 pounds more each week for decreasing reps. While there's nothing wrong with that strategy, and there's a course, a time, and a place for that, it's important to understand that there are different avenues that we can take, and that through different times of the year throughout the athlete calendar, and then also, again, just for different athlete archetypes, we can utilize these strategies in lieu of progressive overload for the sake of speed development or for speed retention. So for this one here, we're going to take a look at a split squat lunge type of movement and how we can progress that over a theoretical 4 weeks. And we're going to show this with both of our athletes just for the sake of kind of seeing how we respond on each side. But then again, looking at using the change in exercise or the exercise variation as our progression over the course of time or over the course of a training cycle. So we're going to pretend here that we've already done several weeks of static stationary split squats and lunges, and we've developed a good robust musculotendinous structure. So now we are working on trying to build in some of this variability in our training cycle. So this first one we're going to do here, and we'll just do like 5 reps for each. Kai, if you want to turn and face me, we'll go 5 reps here. Let's go forward to backwards lunge. So starting simple here, holding in a goblet position, working in a sagittal plane. We do have the element of transitioning our mass or moving forwards to backwards, so there's a little bit more of a stress component for the knees and for the feet here. This is one of the first ones that I would say I would go to after we did this theoretical 12-week overload or split squat pattern. Now we just want to add some forward backwards action to it. So then we get to next week, and the following week thereafter, what we want to now do is use the similar pattern, but now stress it in different planes of motion. So staying in the same goblet hold, what we're going to do here is we're going to go into a crossover lunge, to a lateral lunge, and then back to center. So let's go ahead and check that for about 5 here. So where the load is placed, the type of resistance that we're using, the speed at which we're moving, and then the direction in which we are moving are all key components to exercise progression. And I think for strength and conditioning, just generally speaking, we've just become too gridlocked on more weight, more volume. This is our progression model, and this is what we do, rinse, wash, and repeat. Adding in these little subtleties of variability help to stress the connective tissue structures particularly, and especially when we're talking about moving in different planes or patterns of motion. And this is something that is just going to be complementary to those bigger rocks that we are working in our primary block. So now we've done static split squat lunge, we've done forward to backwards lunge, we've done our crossover to lateral lunge. Now we're going to add a little bit more degree of difficulty in here, and then I would argue that this is going to be a little bit more myofascially driven for the sake of the load placement. We're going to take dumbbell straight up overhead, and we're just going to work a reverse lunge here. So let's go right arm overhead. Right leg is going to step back into a reverse lunge. Let's go 5 reps each. So one of the key aspects of myofascial-based movement is the involvement of as many structures as we can have. So for the sake of this, what we want to think about is from toe to fingertip, how can we involve different structures, different parts of the body in the movement? Taking the dumbbell overhead is going to give us a great illustration of this anterior line and this posterior line, and then also to the lateral line, where now instead of having the dumbbell just in the goblet hold, we are now extending the arm, or flexing the arm rather, overhead, and then getting more of that total myofascial line engagement. So we've changed the load placement, we've changed the speed of movement, we've changed the plane in which we are working through. Now the next step is that we are going to change the speed of movement. So one of my favorite accessory exercises is an impulse lunge, where we're taking that same concept of forwards and backwards lunging, but now we're just adding a little bit of speed to it. So with the impulse lunge, for the sake of this one, we'll go ahead and go back to that goblet hold position. And with this, what we want to see from our athletes is a violent stabbing pattern coming back, and then an aggressive forward step coming through with a rapid deceleration as the foot contacts the ground. So for this one, let's go ahead and hit about 5 reps on each side. Violent coming back, smooth coming through. So once again, we've kept the load the exact same. We're still working essentially the exact same pattern that we started with, but across this hypothetical 4-week timeline, we've touched a lot of different aspects of movement. And I can't overstate it enough. This is not to say that this is superior or supplemental to doing a traditional 4-week progressive overload model. There's absolutely a time and a place for that. But this comes into play as well. And especially our athletes that have developed a good, robust training history. They've developed good strength, good power measures. They have good force expression. Now we want to apply some practicality to that expression of force. Excellent job. So the third way that we can utilize this concept of variability within training for the sake of speed development is utilizing tools that are more open-ended. So it's really for this reason that landmines, med balls, kettlebells, vipers, and things of that nature, even bands and cables to a degree, are really valuable in my book, because even if we were trying to do the same thing every rep, there's just going to be a lot of deviation and a lot of variability to the motion. And I think that this is an advantageous thing for athletes, particularly team sport athletes. So for here, what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate a couple of ways that we can work this in with med ball work. And the first one is going to be very, very simple. So what I'll do sometimes for med ball slams is just cueing the athletes to hit a different point of the ground every time they go into their throw. And really just kind of leave it as open-ended as that. So if we started with just a standard, extension, bilateral slam, where we're working right in front of us every time, and we've developed that ability, we've worked that in our training, that one of those next progressions that I may work in is still staying in the bilateral position, but telling Kai and Jeb here, hey, so for this set of 5, I want you guys to hit a different part of the ground or a different point on the ground with every rep. Go ahead and execute that. Perfect. So nothing magical about that at all. If nothing else, I think something that this does is it helps to just draw in some focus, draw in some attention. I think it also allows the athlete to just kind of open up and move in a couple of different ways and hit some different things that we may not necessarily be able to stress if I were to be very robotic in how we were coaching this. If we were explicitly going for power development, then we want to get away from this variability thing. We want to focus on just putting exactly as much force as we can, or as much velocity as we can, into this throw and hit this point. Then we get beyond that. Now we want to just kind of be able to open up and then do the similar pattern in a slightly different way, and then work to add the velocity back to that. Another thing that we can do is we can go into a single leg stance. So going from a bilateral to a single leg, and now instead of changing where they're going to hit on the ground, what I want you guys to do is this time focus on hitting the exact same spot, but I want you to move at a different speed for all 5 reps. Leaving this as open-ended as we are here has some advantages. There are some things that we need to be a little bit mindful of. Again, if we're working in big groups and we have younger kids, we all know that the maturity levels of high school and middle school athletes isn't necessarily the greatest, so we may need to have a little bit more constraint with that group. But when we do have the appropriate setting or the appropriate athletes, we want to let them get kind of creative and kind of lead the way, so to speak, or have some autonomy with some of these movements. So having them move at a different tempo now is just going to, again, drive conscientiousness. It's going to force a little bit more focus, and then it's going to give them some flexibility as to how they are exactly executing these patterns. So we've shown how we can use variability between 2 different athletes who have 2 different needs across the same exercise. We discussed how we can use variability across a training cycle and using this concept of variation as a training progression across a training cycle. We've looked at the med ball, how we can modify position, we can modify tempo, we can modify where the target point is. Now what we're going to do is look at how we can use variability between sets within sessions. So in this hypothetical here, we'll say that this is 3 subsequent sets that we have in a single day. And what we're going to do is just each time we come back around, we're going to add one little thing to it, but it's going to continue to be the same pattern. So if we start here, and we'll do 2 throws each. And let's say we start out here with just a simple med ball hip toss. So just kind of working that rotational pattern. We'll work 2 each here. Good. So here we have a minimal amount of counter movement, minimal amount of dynamic. This is mostly a static, stationary thing. We would say that this is probably mostly core hip oriented, and we're just working on good, simple power development in the frontal plane. So now what we're going to do, so let's say again, this is a hypothetical session. That was set 1. We went back and did our other pairing. Now we're going to come back to this same movement. But now what I'm going to have Jeb do is just add a little bit of dynamic to this by starting almost like he's in a pitcher stance. And then I just want him to kind of fall in. And as soon as that foot contacts, go ahead and rip. Good. 2. 3. And 4. Good. Same pattern, same plane, adding a little bit of dynamic to it, adding a little bit more force to our throw. Now what we're going to do, so if that was set 2, we come back around to set 3. So now what I'm going to have you do is just add a little bit more momentum to that. So we're going to start on this outside leg, and I just want you to kind of fall in. 1, 2, 3, drop, step and throw. Let it rip. 2, 3, good. Not good.
I know, but
You're good, you're good. Knock him over. Nice. 1, 2, 3. There you go. Good, Kai. Let's go one more each. These look good. One more, Kai. Be an athlete. Not bad.
out of my hands.
So once again, to kind of recap and summarize the points here, there's always going to be reasons and purposes for doing pure overload, progressive overload. That's fundamental to our work, and none of this that we're suggesting is supplemental to that. But with that being said, we have to understand that the pure essence of speed is highly reliant on an attuned sensory motor system. Our ability to detect creates our opportunity to respond. So being able to move and maneuver through slightly different positions with slightly different foot positions and pressures and angles and different stimuli that are going on around us, all at the end of the day kind of feed into this premise of speed or high velocity movement. If we are too robotic in our development and we only ever train with these specific parameters and have very restricted boundaries on how athletes can exercise movement, it doesn't give them the same bandwidth to express the speed and velocity and power that they're developing in more of a real world setting. So a lot of this variability is really just kind of getting a good foundation of being able to be effective and confident, and then also to being able to express the actual art of velocity in different movements and within slight deviations or variability within patterns.